Good morning and welcome to the 2021 Annual Mater Research Showcase. It's my great pleasure to host you today. The showcase is the event in which we celebrate the year. We talk about our achievements, and it also is an opportunity to showcase our wares to our supporters, of which there are many today, and I'm very grateful for you to come. And I know there are too numerous supporters here to mention. It's an opportunity for us to present and to connect with our stakeholders and with our partners. I'd like to thank the people who organised this event behind the scenes, Farhana Martin, Norbert Kienzl and John Baisden. They've reminded me to remind you of the various emergency procedures should anything go wrong, and also to remind the speakers to keep to time because we have a very packed programme in which we have, I think, a very special welcome to country and also a very special guest speaker who I'll talk more about in a moment. But we also have presentations from the winners of our seeding grants from both the early career biomedical and clinical presentations. And then we move on to presentations from some of our senior researchers. There will also be the Sister Medal presentations and award ceremony. And during all of this, there'll be a number of photographic opportunities. And I'd like all the speakers to stay until the end because there will be some more photographs at the end. Speaking of which, I remind all of you here that this event is being photographed and filmed. And by being here, you're giving your consent to that. I'd like to mention some of our stakeholders and our partners, including the newly named Health Translation Queensland, formerly known as Brisbane Diamantina Health Partners, to the University of Queensland, and of course to the TRI, the building that you're in. And the TRI would not be possible, of course, apart from the vision of the state government. When I came to Queensland in 2003, that was the time of Peter Beattie and the transition from the sunshine state to the smart state, which I think if you look at the weather outside was probably a smart move. There've really been quite a lot of buildings and a lot of people infrastructure during that time in Queensland. I think you'd all agree that that is essential. I'd like to thank the members of our Research Advisory Board. Firstly, Dr. Carrie Hilliard, the chair of the board, who's with us today. Also, Professor Frank Gannon, to Professor John Saville, who's beaming in from Melbourne, to Professor Denise Dooland. Thank you for coming down from Cairns, and to Professor Karen Moritz, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. I'd like to remind you that we are part of the broader Mater Group. I'd like to thank Peter Steer for all his support as CEO of Mater Queensland. I'd like to thank Alana Jacoby, who's here today, for attending as head of mission. I'd like to thank Danielle Doyle from Mater Health Queensland, Donna Bonney and her representative from Mater Education, and to Andrew Thomas from Mater Foundation, as well as Virginia Ryan, the chair of the Mater Foundation board, and a number of other people who are here from the Mater Foundation today. Someone once said, a politician, that it's the economy stupid, but I'd like to beg to differ. I think that the last year has been very challenging indeed, for obvious reasons. When it's challenging, I think it tells us something about ourselves and how we rise to that challenge, both at an individual and personal level, but also at an organisational level and as a community. And I think Queensland, and I think all of you here today, those of you beaming in and those of you in person, really got a lot to congratulate yourself about. Health and medical researchers have been talking for ages, but no one would listen about how important we are. I think people finally get it now. Of course, we're important for the health of the nation. We need a healthy nation if we are to succeed including economically. But of course, even though it's very important to attract people, to retain people, to have a thriving biotechnology sector, I think a true measure of a society's wealth is not money. I think the true measure, at least in part, has to be how it cares for the most vulnerable in the community. And I think Marta's done really very well indeed. At the moment, as we speak, that Marta is currently coordinating in Cherbourg vaccination door to door to try and help our First Nation communities. We've all seen the horror unfold in Afghanistan when refugees came to Australia because the COVID-19 situation was so much better in Queensland. A large majority of them came to Queensland, and it was Marta who reached out, who stood up and helped these people to relocate and help them with their health needs. Marta research has not been backward at coming forwards as well, in a whole variety of different ways, helping in the way that we best can, which is through health and medical research. You need a thriving health and medical research sector to have a wealthy community. We've had Mitch Sullivan, who obtained money from Advance Queensland, a funding stream from the state government, to repurpose drugs to try and prevent kidney damage caused by COVID-19. We've had Katharina Ronica, who's developed a novel animal model that recapitulates lung damage in COVID-19 so that she can identify inflammatory changes that will lead to new drugs to try and prevent the disease severity. We've had Vicki Flenady, who reports to the World Health Organization, on what COVID-19 is doing in terms of stillbirth rates globally. And she's working with Kim Ray to try and find out why vaccine rates are patchy and is not as high as they should be in the Indigenous community, particularly amongst expectant mothers. We're working in a whole suite and range of things. And it has been a very, very good year. Indeed, in a time when funding rates have actually been low, we have actually been boosting our funding rates. We've had overseas grants. We've had several grants from America, for example, from the Department of Defense. Our NHMRC success has been the highest on record. We had a number of investigator grants. We had a number of ideas grants. We had a Centre of Research Excellence and an NHMRC partnership grant. The best year on record at a time when the funding rates are the lowest on records. We continue to be the most successful institute within Queensland in terms of the MRFF funding rates, which of course, so we should be, because we're about being highly translational. But these are funding successes. They don't matter. All that matters actually are our research outputs, which need to be excellent and of the highest quality. Today is a Marta first. I learned just a few moments ago that one of our researchers, Jake Grattan, has just been interviewed by The Economist about his research in autism. Again, helping the needs of the vulnerable in the community. We've had a number of awards, both national and statewide as well. It really has been a very good year. And so I'd like to thank all our supporters, but I'd also like to thank all of you at Marta Research, our operational staff, as well as our research staff for making it such a good year. Which now brings me to the welcome to country. I'd like to welcome all of you to Maroochy, who is a woman of proud Turrbal and Gubbi Gubbi heritage, was born in Cherbourg, and amongst the many accolades that she has had as an elder and as a songwoman is the Grand Prix Opera for her performance in the Australian opera Black River. She has also sung for Barack Obama at the G20 in 2014. So I think we're all very honored to have her here. Maroochy, thank you.
Palamdiko, Gundul Numbaler, Palamdiko, Gundul Numbaler, Yang Indai, Yango, Gundai, Yango, Balamdiko Kundunumbule, Balamdiko Kundunumbule, Balamdiko Kundunumbule, Balamdiko Kundunumbule, Yang Indai, Yango, Kundai, Yango, Balamdiko Kundunumbule. Balamdiko Kundunumbule. Bukari Marumba Woolen Kalpanu, that's welcome to Woolen Yaba in the language of the Turrbal people. My name is already shown up there is Maroochy Baramba. That means the black swan. From those people who sing up the wind, the painting on my face represents the black swan and the painting on my cloak represents the black swan. My family are descended from a man who was nicknamed the Duke of York way back in the 1830s. That name was anglicised from Dakiyaka, which, like yourselves, it actually means healing. In fact, Yaka, you know, as in hard yak, actually comes from our language. Our language actually went to print in the 1860s. The Turrbal people were actually documented as being extinct or on the verge of extinction back in the early 1860s, and it's really just been one small family that has survived the impact of European settlement upon our ancestral homelands. The Turrbal ancestral homelands actually goes from the, well, you've got the Dakiyaka, it's made up of 5 different clan groups. You've got the Dakiyaka clan, whose area of cultural responsibility is between the Brisbane River and the Pine River. You've got the Coorparoo clan, whose area of cultural responsibility is between the Brisbane River and the outer upper rim of the Logan River catchment. You have the Chipara clan, which is southwest of the Coorparoo, and the Mulruben, which is east of the Coorparoo. And north of the Dakiyaka or the Duke of York clan, you have the Ninginigi. Now, if you read a little bit about Brisbane history, particularly early contact, you will come across the notion of a Duke of York tribe. So that name, as Foster Faines wrote about him, Foster Faines being the commandant of the penal settlement of Moreton Bay back in the 1830s, he wrote that the Duke of York was the chief of the Brisbane tribe. The Ninginigi area of cultural responsibility is actually between the Pine River and the Alimba Creek. It takes in the area east of Caboolture as well as the Redcliffe Peninsula. Me, myself, yeah, I, as already mentioned, so I won't get into that in a big way other than when I do a welcome to country, that is done as a blessing of the gathering in a song. I will do that in a tinty while. I'd like to firstly express our gratitude to the organisers for asking us to be here in this capacity today. There's, I think no greater compliment you can pay an Indigenous person than to acknowledge their traditional identity. And even if you let them know a little bit about where their country might be, that you know, that is also a compliment as well. So we feel truly blessed on many occasions when we get the opportunity to do the welcome here in Brisbane. So when I do the welcome to country, I generally do it as started with an extract from the Australian National Anthem, for which I was asked to write for the Indigenous All-Stars game a few years ago. I was actually asked to write the whole anthem, but for my welcomes, I just do an extract as a statement of reconciliation. Because I would like, I've chosen to do it, even though some of our football stars choose not to sing it whenever they're standing, and that's their choice. But again, I might think, can they sing it in the first place? No, I'm only joking. I was the one that messed it right up, standing in the middle of the Melbourne cricket ground back in 1993 in front of 100,000 people. And I think it was all that testosterone on either side of me, as well as being a little bit starstruck, even although, like, having been sent to Melbourne as a 12-year-old, one-eyed Richmond, but they were Essendon and Carlton, but second best thing, so I still got starstruck. Yeah, so I got trolled on the internet. You know, somebody says, "Oh, she sounds like a goat," and I'm talking to my daughter, and I thought, "Nah, I'm sure this." You know, I can't be the greatest of all times because it's a GOAT. You know, I'm only 1/4 Brit, so I think the way I sang it also had that amount of its spirituality in the song as well. So yeah, so that's just a bit of a yeah thing. So I shall start it now, and thanks for having us. After that will be the blessing of the gathering, which is the traditional way we do it. In fact, my grandfather was the songman for all the South Queensland tribes, and he's in the papers throughout the 1940s as being such, representing the South Queensland tribe, because in Queensland we have a history where all of the Aboriginals were rounded up and put onto reserves or church missions. Whenever we, on those reserves, gradually, we still kept our ancient societal groups, but that all started at the beginning of the 20th century, but gradually as the century went on, we started intermarrying because, you know, you didn't want to be too much of an inbred with your relations or whatever. That's a no-no with the Aboriginals. You have to look at like somebody over there for marriage. You can, not even your 10th cousin. Some of your elders go, no, you can't go there. Yeah, yeah, so I shall start it, I suppose. Targeting Australian Nabayagari Murumbaga, the Kolomai keep and Biki Numbai Tamil and Murumba Bukairi, Yadini Australia. Yadini Australia Boo means advance Australia in strength. The lyrics of that song, the interpretation is, people of Australia, let us make a good spirit place. For we are from the ancient, we're of the past and the present, and we are all Australia's future. I shall now do the blessing of the gathering and exit with a song from my birthplace, which is Cherbourg Aboriginal settlement. We'll see. Manda Baritha, Muriana men, Manda Baritha, Muriana men, Manda Baritha, Muriana men, Bithal Gariathai, Gavai Gari Buja, Manda Barisa, Muriana men, Manda Barisa, Muriana men, Adopalava, Ninyunganala, Manda Barisa, Muriana men, Manda Barisa, Muriana men, Manda Barisa, Muriana men, Manda Barisa, Muriana men. Karinina Nami, Chichimobiron, Garin in the nami, Garin in the nami, Jujimobironu, Garin in the nami, Jujimobironu. Thank you.
Thanks, Maroochy, for giving me the opportunity to try and follow that. That was incredible. I'm lost for words. So now I'd like to introduce to you our very special guest speaker, Julieanne Gilbert, the Assistant Minister for Health and Regional Infrastructure, who's come down from Mackay today. She's a fifth-generation Mackay resident, and she has a long background in education and is extremely passionate about trying to improve the opportunities for our young individuals, whether they're doing science and STEM or otherwise. Thank you, Julieanne.
Over here. Okay. Oh, good morning, everyone. And wasn't that fantastic? I was just mesmerised by that welcome to country. So thank you, Maroochy, for that wonderful welcome to country. And I too would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we're having this wonderful ceremony here today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the Maher Foundation, the University of Queensland and the Translational Research Institute, and also the lovely Sisters of Mercy, and I met some this morning. So going to Catholic schools up in Mackay, always like to say hello to the Sisters of Mercy. And I would just like to say, it was mentioned earlier about the Mater hospitals doing the vaccinations out at Cherbourg. I was lucky enough to be out there last week and the Mayor was going around with some of your wonderful workers, just a delightful team, and knocking on doors. I mean, people were quite happy to come out and get their vaccinations. They just weren't they were a bit shy about going up to the hospital or to one of the centres. So thank you for the work that you are doing, potentially saving the lives of that community, which is wonderful. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today at the annual Mater Research Showcase, and to be in a room full of very important people. So it's just a real pleasure to be here. Minister Yvette Darth apologises that she can't be here today. She is travelling up around the Torres Strait to make sure that we get those immunisation rates up in that part of Queensland, which is very important. So it's such a really important opportunity to be here today and for you to be able to engage with peers and recognise the essential work that you and the Mater Research undertake, making a really positive impact and difference to our health system. So this year's showcase, it demonstrates the breadth and the skill and the experience in the fields of biomedical and clinical research. And today's program alone gives the flavour of the great work of the Mater Research and the wonderful talent and the outcomes. And I was talking to somebody earlier today about the wonderful outcomes that you have and about making sure everybody knows what you're doing, because it's just fantastic work. And how wonderful is it that Jake is going to have his work on autism published later on this month. And as a former teacher, I was so excited to hear about that, because when you're working with little ones, working with their families, and they're trying to find a path of what life's going to look like for their children, that the work that you do is going to be so essential for those children's outcomes and their families' outcomes. So it's wonderful to hear that paper is going to talk about the work and the challenges and the beliefs that autism is linked to gut microbiome. Is that how you pronounce it? So, I'm sorry. Yeah, and finding this, it's going to have just really big implications on the interventions, and clearly illustrates just how important that work is. So the evidence of work as researchers, it generates the foundation for better and more effective treatment for individuals. And it also improves the efficiency of the healthcare delivery, that you can continue to offer the world-class healthcare now and into the future. So thank you for the work that you do. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted to us all very clearly just how important that healthcare and medical research is in responding effectively to significant and emerging health challenges. And so the world's focus has been on researchers since COVID-19. And it's also highlighted the exceptional individuals working in this space, that you've made considerable contribution to COVID-19 response efforts, and often under very trying and stressful circumstances and situations. So thank you for your work. In addition to the direct health benefits of medical research, there's also the exciting potential to translate discoveries into commercial opportunities. And this is something that governments really like. We like to know that we can develop opportunities out there in the commercial world. This in turn can help create high-skilled, knowledge-based jobs and contribute to the sustainable growth of the Queensland economy. So for all of these reasons, the Queensland Government and Queensland Health are committed to supporting health and medical research as outlined in our strategy, Queensland Advancing Health Research 2026 strategy. So this strategy, it's a guiding vision for the development of our health system over the next decade. And the vision to position Queensland as the healthiest people in the world by 2026. So the challenges out there. So this is quite a lofty, ambitious, but I'm confident that Queensland has the skills and the dedicated individuals to make it happen, and sitting here in this room with those individuals. So I am confident that many of you attending this year's Mater Research Showcase will have an important play to delivering that goal. And it will be our vision, leadership and knowledge that will identify advancement in health and medical research to drive quality healthcare and in the most effective, cost-effective way. And the goal will be achieved through researchers, clinicians, collaborating with core focus and improving on healthcare outcomes. And it will take a lot of work to achieve this by 2026. So when you see people are not quite as healthy as they should be, because we're talking about the round tummies before, there's the challenges out there. But the Queensland, as a Queensland government, we are committed to making this a reality. And that's why we have pledged $10 million of funding to implement this strategy. And this will help to drive key priorities, including supporting innovative and collaborative research opportunities and promoting partnerships between industry, research, organisations and government. This includes generating more funding from national agencies such as the National Health and Medical Research Council and Medical Research Fund Foundation. In this regard, I was delighted to see last week 3 more Mater researchers were successful in winning almost $2.5 million worth of NHMRC Ideas Grant Scheme funding. So congratulations. This grant is a testament to your exceptional work in the field of research, and I look forward to seeing the outcomes from that research. And I'm also looking forward to seeing this grant being the start of more to come. Tapping into funding opportunity, it's crucial to supporting Queensland research and helping our research and our goal of achieving our healthiest people by 2026. Overall, Queensland has so far attracted only about 13% of funding attributed from the Medical Research Future funding. This compared to our roughly 20% of the share of the Australian economy and population. So this represents a major opportunity for us as Queenslanders to the research community. The reasons underlining this historic performance are complex, but there are ways to address this imbalance. And one of the aspects of changing the statistic is growth in the number of clinicians combining research and their practice and working in the health system. So clinicians, researchers are well placed to identify the key research questions around better patient care and translate the finding back into practice. We must also build stronger partnerships between the health system, our universities and medical research institutes so the expertise and knowledge can flow more freely. And for these reasons, Queensland Health has established the Queensland Advancing Clinical Research Fellowship Program 3 years ago. It delivers a clear commitment within the Queensland Advanced Health Research 2026 strategy to fund new fellowship programs that support clinicians, researchers undertaking research linked to their practice. The scheme is open to the Mater Health Services staff, and I encourage those eligible to apply. The scheme's specific goals are growing the number of clinical researchers overall, supporting research that is immediately translatable to practice care, and building collaboration between health systems and research partners, and boosting our competitiveness for national research funding. So it sounds like there's a lot of people in the room who'll be able to go tick, tick, tick. So looking forward to seeing you getting those grants. The scheme has a pipeline of several award categories catering to different career stages and experiences. So far, 28 clinician researchers have shared around $7.9 million in funding. And I understand the outcome of the latest round of the scheme is shortly to be finalised, providing an additional boost to Queensland researchers. Another central part of our strategy for health and medical research in Queensland is expanding equitable access to clinical trials. And as you will all know, clinical trials are the very tangible form of research translation to give our patients access to emerging treatment options. Queensland has been in the forefront of this through piloting the use of telehealth in clinical trials. Known as teletrials, this initiative allows patients to receive quality healthcare at or closer to their homes via telecommunications. And it's been vital at improving access to specialist healthcare for people in regional areas. And as a regional member of the Queensland community, this is great. Telehealth overcomes geographical obstacles that may prevent people from receiving important healthcare and demonstrates that we can achieve by leveraging technology. It also highlights the role that research plays in informing and building more equitable health system. There is a need, therefore, to support both medical research that is relevant for people across regional Queensland and in particular communities, such as our First Nations Queenslanders, as well as research working in these areas. Last year, the Department of Health provided $400,000 to 7 of our smaller regional hospitals and health services to grow their local capacity to undertake research and tailor it to their needs. This investment is being used to support research, education and training, and seed funding grants for research projects. I understand that expanding Mater research activities and linkages to regional Queensland will be an area to focus on into the future. And there is an opportunity in Mackay, where I come from. I warmly, just putting it out there, I warmly welcome this and encourage you to seek out opportunities to perform partnerships with regions to help share our expertise and ensure our research programs reflect the needs of our communities. And doing so will be a natural extension to what this year's Mater Research Forum aims to achieve, and will be consistent with the goals of the Queensland's Advancing Health Research 2026 strategy. Along with building new partnerships, I hope that this year the Mater Research Showcase allows you to celebrate your achievements in the field of research over the past year. Thank you once again for all of your important work that you do and to the contributions that you make improving the health and well-being of Queensland. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julieanne. That was very inspiring. Okay, so now we're getting to the pointy end. We're actually having some presentations. And the first presentations will be chaired by Associate Professor Helen Barrett. Helen is probably known to many of you. She's the Director of Endocrinology at Mater. And for much of this year, she's also been Acting Head of Medicine, which is not an easy gig when you have a pandemic. She is also the co-program leader of the Chronic and Integrated program, and she's the proud recipient of a UQ Amplify Fellowship. Helen Barrett, thank you.
Take my mask off. Look, it's my absolute delight to be the person to introduce the two awardees of our early career seeding grants for this year. They were chosen through a competitive process of written project proposal and also persuasive presentation or interview with the Mater Foundation judging panel at the Future Leaders Symposium held in October. The two awardees are Dr. Kavita Bisht and Dr. Katie Brooker. My pleasure first is to introduce Dr. Kavita Bisht. Dr. Bisht is a research officer in the stem cell biology group at Mater Research Institute, the University of Queensland. Kavita was awarded a PhD in immunology in 2014 from the School of Medical Science at Griffin University, where her project focused on anti-inflammatory and cell signalling effects of bile pigments. During her PhD, Kavita also worked at the Harvard Medical School for 1 year, which encouraged her to pursue research further. Kavita is a recipient of several awards, including the Equity Trustee Award from Mater Foundation and the Franklin Women COVID-19 Carers Support Scholarship. Today, Kavita will be talking to us about her current research, focusing on identifying new treatments for blood cancers and anemia of inflammatory diseases. Through her project, she's testing whether blocking the effect of an inflammatory protein produced by myeloproliferative neoplasms will decrease the progression of such neoplasms or cancers and increase patient survival. Please come and tell us.
Thanks, Helen. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to present my research. My research focuses on finding new treatment for blood stem cell cancers. So my name is Kavita Bisht, and I'm a research officer at Mater, and our team includes Professor John Pierre Levesque, Professor Stephen Lane, Ampian Alliance Australia. And I also want to thank supporters of Mater Foundation for supporting this research. So what are these blood stem cell cancers? They are called as myeloproliferative neoplasms or MPN. So our stem cells makes all our blood and immune cells, which include red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So what happens when patients are diagnosed with MPN, the stem cell starts making too many of these blood and immune cells, which can then lead to blood clots and a stroke. And if on top of that, MPN gradually progresses over time, and it can then lead to acute myeloid leukemia and then an early death. Sadly, 15 Australians every day lose their life to blood cancer or related disorders. Although MPN is mostly diagnosed in people over 50 years of age, but people can also be diagnosed when they are in their 20s and 30s. Now, I want to share with you a story of MPN patients. This is Yolanda Visser. As you can see the timeline, Yolanda was diagnosed with early stage of MPN in early 2000. At the time, she was only prescribed a drug to control her platelet counts and blood clotting. But her MPN progressed over time, and she was rushed to emergency department and was placed on stroke watch. At the time, Yolanda received chemotherapy and bone marrow transplant for her MPN. However, her life is not same since then. She's still living with MPN. She's developed bad headaches, blurred vision, and overall, her quality of life is badly impacted. MPN is a heartbreaking condition, but it is underrepresented in Australia cancer registries. Therefore, more research is required to understand MPN, to diagnose it better. So there are treatments to control MPN, which include chemotherapy and a drug called ruxolitinib. But patients develop resistance over time, and these drugs have their side effects of their own. Although bone marrow transplant is the only cure, but it's only suitable for a small cohort of MPN patients. Bone marrow transplant is a intensive procedure, and patient must be carefully selected. And only few patients are suitable because of existing health problems and due to the risk of not surviving bone marrow transplant. Therefore, we need to discover better treatments for MPN. So my research is focusing on a drug which targets inflammatory protein, which is produced by MPN. So MPN is a disease of inflammation. And thanks to Maher Foundation donors and my EMCR grant, I will now be able to target MPN at early stage with this anti-inflammatory protein together with the current drug treated for MPN patients. And I aim to improve the blood cell count. So there is no more MPN and no more blood clottings and stroke. With my research, I aim to improve the quality of life of people who live with MPN and to keep Australians healthy and MPN free so everyone can get to enjoy their life and do whatever they love to do. And I would thank everyone for their attention. Thank you.
Thank you for telling us about your research and congratulations. My next pleasure is to introduce Dr. Katie Brooker. Dr. Brooker is a health and disability researcher. She's completed an undergraduate degree in health sciences and through this gained a language and understanding of the social determinants of health, providing a framework to contextualise the health disparities she's witnessed while growing up. After learning about the significant health gap experienced by people with intellectual disability, Dr. Brooker was motivated to make a change. Seeing that researchers were the people making the most difference, she went on to do her PhD. Her postdoctoral research focuses on working with people with intellectual disability and autistic people to improve the way healthcare is delivered to them. Dr. Brooker is going to be telling us about delivering an online module co-designed with people living with autism to medical students. This module teaches content and skills that autistic people want their doctors to know, including key health issues, communication skills, and tips to provide accessible healthcare. Katie, come and tell us.
Thank you, Helen. So like Helen said, so I'm going to talk to you about our project to teach medical students about autism. So first off, I want to acknowledge the generous supporters of the Maher Foundation, as well as the Cooperative Research Centre for Living with Autism for their support of my research. And I also acknowledge the input and guidance from our Autistic Advisory Group at the Queensland Centre for Intellectual and Developmental Disability. So to start off this morning, I want to tell you about Daisy. Daisy's in her 30s. She's just gone back to work after having her 2 children. She's married and she loves taking the dog for a walk with the kids. Daisy is also autistic. Odds are you know someone like Daisy, someone on the autism spectrum. There are about 350,000 autistic Australians. So back to Daisy. She's gone to her GP because her husband says she's not quite herself. She doesn't get excited about things like she used to, and everything just seems like such an effort. Daisy's also recently moved, so she's had to go to a new GP. She sits down to fill out the patient registration form, and she's starting to get a bit anxious about seeing a new doctor, and the bright lights and the ringing phone are really making it hard to think. But she gets the form finished. She's written down she's autistic and she thinks she might be experiencing depression. After quite a wait, the doctor calls her in. Daisy's really having trouble thinking and getting her words out by this point. She tries to tell the doctor what's been happening, but he just doesn't get it. In the end, Daisy walks out without any help. Her GP wasn't able to understand what she was trying to tell him, and the whole environment there just made it much worse. Now, this story isn't unique to Daisy. It also isn't limited to GPs. It's a problem autistic people experience across our healthcare system, including at our hospitals. People feel they aren't listened to, their concerns aren't taken seriously, and they often don't end up receiving the help that they need. And this has quite dire consequences. So autistic people live 16 years less than non-autistic people. That's 16 years of life lost. And this health gap isn't because autism inherently makes you sicker, but rather because our doctors don't know how to work with autistic people. Now you might be thinking, how does this happen? How do our doctors not know how to work with autistic people? Autism was quite common. And a large part of the reason our doctors don't know anything about autism is because we don't teach them anything about autism. So for example, in medical school, autism forms just a small part of one lecture. Most content focuses on the diagnostic criteria. Case studies almost always focus on children, forgetting all of these autistic children eventually grow into autistic adults. And importantly, the things that we teach medical students haven't been informed by autistic people. And when you stop and think about that, that small amount of content that we teach medical students is quite mismatched to that large health gap experienced by autistic people. And this is what I want to change. I want to improve the education our next generation of doctors receive about autism and upskill them so they're better at working with autistic patients. So for the last few years, as a bit of a side project, I've been working on the development of an online module about autism specifically designed for medical students. I worked with our autistic advisory group to co-design the content, and the process of working with autistic people to narrow down the key things they want their future doctors to know about autism has really been invaluable. So in this module, students learn things they aren't taught in medical school about the important health issues in autism, communication skills, and practical tips for making healthcare more accessible for autistic people. So if we think to Daisy, the things that we cover in the module would have provided her GP with the knowledge that depression is more common in autistic people and often might not present in the typical way. Her GP would have known that they need to communicate in a clear and concrete way and might have had a bit more awareness of the sensory needs of autistic people and maybe offered Daisy a quiet room to wait. And this is where my ECR grant comes in. We're now ready to move on to the next stage, which is launching it to students and evaluating it. We want to be able to say that we're increasing medical students' knowledge about autism and we are improving their confidence to work with autistic patients. We want to be able to find this out so we can show to UQ and to other medical schools across Australia that this is an easy and cost-effective start to increasing their autism content within their degree. And I know we're only adding a small amount to medical education about autism, but this is good content reflective of the priorities of the autistic community. Overall, we want to use this module to help produce an incoming workforce of doctors that are more aware of autism and the autistic experience, so that we can change the way healthcare services are delivered to autistic people and ultimately improve health outcomes for this population. To finish, I want you to think back to Daisy and the autistic people you know. Wouldn't it be amazing if they were able to go to their doctor and receive the help that they need? Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing that with us, and certainly for your work also with the Diabetes Centre, which we're enjoying thoroughly. Now, I think I need to invite Assistant Minister Gilbert and also Maher up to present the certificates. So the first certificate will be for Dr. Kavita Bisht. And the second certificate will be for Dr. Katie Brooker. And congratulations again to both of you. It's now my pleasure to introduce the next chair, Dr. Danisha Jaberi, who's a Mater Foundation Senior Research Fellow and a group leader, and she has a joint appointment at Mater Research and Queensland Brain Institute.
Thank you, Helen. It is my absolute pleasure to chair this next session, in which we will hear from 4 senior researchers about their outstanding contribution to Mater. First up, we will have Associate Professor Paul Griffin. Paul is the Director of Infectious Diseases at Mater and Associate Professor of Medicine at the University of Queensland. He is the recipient of fellowships in infectious diseases, clinical microbiology, and tropical medicine, and is the principal investigator and medical director of Nucleus Network. He's also the principal investigator on over 125 clinical trials, including 7 vaccines for COVID-19. Paul is the director and scientific advisory board member of the Immunization Coalition. Now, given his involvement in a number of COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials, Paul will discuss some relevant background of the vaccine that are currently in use and explain how these were developed so rapidly, as well as will outline some of the novel vaccines that are currently under development. Over to you, Paul.
Well, thanks very much for the kind introduction and the invitation to speak. Obviously, it's a big honour to be speaking amongst a group of such high caliber speakers as we have today. So I'll get right into it. I do have some relative disclosures, relevant. So I have been the principal investigator on 7 COVID vaccine trials, as well as a number of therapies, and on the advisory boards now for a few companies involved in that space as well. But obviously, this content is my own. So I just thought it's useful to look back on the history of coronavirus vaccines. And while it is true we've had no licensed human coronavirus vaccines previously, we did have quite a few for animals in the past. And fortunately, we did have quite a few really promising candidates for the first SARS back in 2002. A number of different platforms, recombinant inactivated, for example. And in a lot of animal studies, both small animals and non-human primates looked like they were going to work really well. But that was a very different virus. While it was a coronavirus as well, much more severe disease. So fortunately, we eradicated that with all the infection control measures that we have relied on to control this one as well. And so we didn't get to progress those vaccines through clinical trials. But this work certainly served as a platform for many of the vaccines we're hearing about at the moment and still under development. And a lot of people ask how we're able to develop these vaccines so quickly, and it was not by skipping any key steps. Obviously, funding was a huge part of this. We're able to do a lot of steps that we normally have to do sequentially in parallel, including scaling and manufacturing right at the outset, which of course is a huge gamble. And this was built on truly years of research. So we had great candidates for the first SARS. We had a lot of the companies that we're using the vaccines of now who had great promising candidates for other pathogens. On the right, there is a study I did with Moderna back in 2015 for an RSV candidate that they had designed. And we had some clever study designs. We incorporated phase 1, 2, and 3 into the same protocol for some of these, and had a lot of help from regulatory bodies. So on the right is a little graph showing the time it took from HREC or Ethics Committee submission to first patient, first dose. And this was 40 to 50 days, which a lot of people in this audience will know is fairly extraordinary in terms of getting a clinical trial up and running. So that was really helpful as well. And in terms of our supply, we've been very fortunate, I think, to secure so many good vaccines at so many doses, nearly 170 million doses. Obviously, Pfizer was approved first way back on the 25th of January. AstraZeneca approved not long thereafter. Moderna approved fairly recently. We've got 25 million doses of that one. And Novavax is really exciting because while that was one that we've heard about for a while, it's just completed its rolling TGA submission and just been approved in the first country last week. So are these vaccines all truly new? And the answer there is, of course, no. So mRNA technology, despite a lot of claims on social media to the contrary, is actually not new technology. So BioNTech, the group that made the Pfizer vaccine, has been around since 2008. They have around 20 other candidates, mostly for malignancies, but a lot of really good vaccine candidates as well. And Moderna is an American company, but they've been around since 2010. They have 24 vaccine candidates. And again, I did a study with them in 2015 on their RSV candidate, and they have a CMV vaccine that looks really promising as well. So they've been around for some time. And even the viral vector technology, again, that we hear about with AstraZeneca, not new, been around since the 70s, some challenges in the 80s early on, but then they were able to refine that. We had improved safety and immunogenicity, a lot of really good candidates, including the J&J vaccine, which is not one we have here for COVID, but they had some really promising candidates for a whole host of other viruses. And so nearly 200,000 participants had received vaccines like this even before COVID. And the Oxford group have done a tremendous effort, really. It's been amazing what they've been able to achieve. And so driven by Ebola, there was a lot of programs, and this was part of what the support for UQ as well, where they were wanting to support development of a new vaccine in really rapid time for a so-called disease X. I think everyone thought a new pandemic was going to come at some stage. No one expected it to be as big as this one or come now. And so these guys developed their ChAdOx1 candidate years before COVID was a thing. And they described it as a plug and play viral vector vaccine. So any new pathogen, we could just slot the DNA in there and make a new vaccine. And so even before COVID, over 300 people had received that vector platform for a host of other infectious diseases, including another coronavirus, the MERS, or the Middle Eastern coronavirus that, again, isn't causing us too many troubles now, but they had a practice run with a very related virus, which was good. And Novavax, very similar. It's been around for a very long time. So they've got a lot of background there, including doing a lot of studies for the other coronaviruses in the past as well, Ebola vaccines, for example. And while they didn't get any vaccines across the line yet before their COVID one, there were no significant safety concerns. So again, looks like a really safe and effective platform. And they have a really extensive pipeline of a whole host of candidates. And I've been fortunate to work on them for a long time now. So I've been the principal investigator on their RSV vaccine studies, both for healthy volunteers, elderly, even in pregnancy. We've trialed their RSV vaccine, Ebola and flus, including the novel flu H7N9 that we did fairly rapidly a few years ago, and almost, I guess, a practice run for doing this. They produced a vaccine fairly quickly and we took it rapidly into clinical trials. So they've got some runs on the board in terms of doing that. But in terms of their COVID candidate, so again, this is a new platform. So it's a recombinant spike protein nanoparticle, bit of a mouthful. And unfortunately, when you say nanoparticle in the media, a lot of people think it means some kind of microchip, but it just means a small thing that looks a bit like a virus. And I was fortunate to take that one into clinical trials way back on the 26th of May last year. So that's a vaccine that started its clinical journey in Australia. And you can see on the right, that was our New England Journal publication showing that vaccine was safe and effective. Started the phase 3 a while ago, had some challenges, mostly through recruitment of their studies and some manufacturing issues, no safety concerns, of course. Rolling submission completed to the TGA just over a week ago, and it's now authorised for use in Indonesia. So there's a lot of excitement about that one coming, and that'll be one that we have will be part of our rollout here. And so in terms of next generation vaccines, again, we've trialled a number of those right here in Queensland, which is really exciting. And there's a lot of vaccines that have actually made it into clinical trials. Some 105 vaccines now have progressed to entering into clinical trials. And it's not that we think that there's any problems with the ones we have. We know the vaccines that are approved and in use already are very safe and very effective. But it's true, they're not perfect. And there's a number of desired properties we'd like to see from a vaccine closer to being perfect that I've listed there. So maybe something that provides longer protection, maybe even lifelong, probably won't get that, but that'd be nice. And higher efficacy in all the outcomes. So we know these vaccines particularly are tremendously effective at protecting against severe disease and still good against preventing transmission, but we'd like that to be higher. So it'd be great to have a vaccine that truly blocked transmission, for example, and even things like thermal stability or long-term stability to make transport and storage easier would be great properties. So there's a lot of really good work on the so-called second generation vaccines. And so some of these, of course, the UQ vaccine, really clever guys in the laboratory that came up with that clamp technology just to help keep the antigen in that vaccine in a shape that gets a better immune response. Unfortunately, the first candidate had that issue with diagnostic interference in HIV testing, but I'm sure those clever guys will be able to make some candidates that'll be a big part of this at some stage into the future. Also trialling a vaccine with the Serum Institute of India. It'd be great to have a vaccine less susceptible to changes from new variants. So these guys have more specifically targeted the part of the spike protein that binds to our cells, hopefully making it less susceptible to changes when the new variants come. And so that one's still in clinical trials. And then this is a really exciting vaccine that I'm trialling as well, which instead of the viral vector in the case of AstraZeneca, delivering that payload via an intramuscular injection, and sorry, the formatting's covered some of the text there, but what they've done here is used a harmless bacteria to put the part that encodes the spike protein. So basically a probiotic that you can just drink and then deliver the instructions to make those spike proteins. And the other part of that is hopefully delivering it via that mechanism might induce a more mucosal immune response. So too early to say how that's going, but that's in trials as well. And then this one I'm really excited about. This is an intranasal vaccine. So for a long time, we've tried intranasal delivery to get an immune response. We often struggle to get a high enough response. So these guys have changed the adenoviral vector. So the ones we're using now don't replicate. This one has a single cycle of replication. So it boosts the production of the spike protein some 100-fold. So it's thought that might be strong enough to give us a good response when delivered intranasally. And so that one's in clinical trials as well. And finally, with a large collaborator, we've been trialling a few vaccines. And while this might seem very similar to some of the ones that are around already, we're doing this as a booster. So the clinical trials for boosting are starting. So, and also bivalent. So combining a couple of different ones into the same vaccine. So this is all underway, but I guess preparing us more for what the future might look like. And so we're very fortunate to have made a number of safe and highly effective vaccines in record time, using a lot of different platforms that hadn't really made it all the way before, but had been under investigation for some time, and without compromising any of the usual steps required to prove a vaccine safe and effective in clinical trials. And that's been borne out, I guess, by the real world experience, showing us those vaccines are as safe and effective as those clinical trials indicated. There are lots of new candidates under investigation, so 105 vaccines in clinical trials. Hopefully some of those will have some properties to build upon the vaccines that we already have that, as I say, are safe and effective. So there's lots of novel mechanisms and different routes of administration that are all under investigation. And I think it's been really rewarding and exciting to see that Australia, and Queensland in particular, has been a really big part of that, and shown again that it's a great place to do clinical trials and help with the development of, you know, such important things as these vaccines. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that very insightful talk, and obviously your tremendous contribution to the COVID-19 vaccine trials here in Queensland. So our next speaker is going to be Professor Sandie McCarthy. Professor McCarthy has a joint appointment between UQ and Mater Health Services. She has a particular interest in women's wellness during and following breast cancer therapy, and is currently co-director of the Women's Wellness After Cancer program based at the Menzies Institute of Health in Queensland. Sandie's current funded research has two streams. The first stream focuses on issues related to long-term outcomes of cancer treatment, and the second concentrates on the collaborative interventions to assess and manage the toxicities of acute cancer treatments. So today, Sandie's talk will cover risks associated with cancer treatments in women and how these women can be supported to aid their recovery from cancer treatment and to regain control for their well-being. Over to you, Sandie.
Thanks, Denisha. Can you all hear me? Yeah, sorry, I'm a wanderer. You can't hear me? You can hear me now? Yeah, great, thank you. So my work is all about what happens when the exemplary care that we give during cancer treatment, particularly for women, when that stops, because we do it very well. Women are surviving longer and longer, and in some instances we can cure cancers, but we do leave them alone once they've exited our treatment. There's very little support for them. There's very little education for them to actually manage the ramifications of their cancer diagnosis and its treatment. And we talk about it in terms of what happens when the casseroles stop coming around, because you have a new normal and you also have stuff that's not working. Sorry, I won't be wandering. Are we working now? Great. So these are some of the problems that we end up with. It's inevitable, for example, that a woman treated for breast cancer will end up with hot flushes. They have a lot of balance and nerve problems, a lot of pain and tingling in the fingers and toes. Osteoporosis is another really common one. Women these days, for reasons that will become very apparent later, tend to go into particularly breast cancer and gynae cancer treatment overweight is the best way of saying it. And they come out of that treatment even more overweight because they no longer have the nausea and vomiting. We can handle that really well now, but they're treated with drugs that actually increase their appetite, and they become even more overweight than when they went into treatment. They get limb swelling from lymph node removal, persistent distress associated with their diagnosis and the ongoing issues that they experience, fatigue and cloudy thinking. I've known women of very high caliber, pharmacists, doctors, who haven't actually been able to go back to work because their thinking is just not what it used to be. Incontinence from surgery, and most distressing are these cardiometabolic diseases that occur as a result of some of the treatments we give them. So this is a big payload. And the issue is that women are living a long time with this particular payload after treatment. The really good news is that it can be mitigated and often it can be prevented. And this is how. And this slide, sorry, I'm not allowed past that cross. This slide demonstrates the synergy of how all of this works. So cancer is ultimately a condition caused by DNA damage, one way or another. And there are many things that can contribute to that DNA damage. There's many risks. And of those, the ones that we really concentrate in our team are things like abdominal fat. Somebody mentioned, the minister mentioned round tummies before. That is probably one of the single biggest risk factors, not a cause, but a risk factor for the development of female cancers. And that's because abdominal fat is a wonderful organ all of its own. It pumps out lots of hormones, it pumps out lots of inflammatory factors that actually create a microenvironment that is favourable to cancer development. So we need to start thinking about abdominal fat as an organ as powerful as the liver, and try and do something to actually reduce the amount of abdominal fat we can. And we do that by maintaining a healthy weight throughout life, by keeping our visceral fat load very low, by eating a mostly plant-based diet and undertaking physical activity. That helps prevent cancer because it mitigates some of the risk factors that actually contribute to DNA damage, but it also, in a beautifully symmetrical way, helps us offset the outcomes of cancer treatment that I talked about before. And it's more and more strongly believed that it helps prevent cancer recurrence. So this is probably news you don't want to hear if you're indulging in a lot of chocolate and a lot of alcohol and you're a bit of a couch potato. My job in life is to actually get you moving. One of the first things we need to be very aware of is eating the rainbow. This is how in our studies we actually put it to our women. Eat colourfully. We don't tell them you've got to do so many grams of this or so many grams of that. Eat as many colours as you can. Eat as many vegetables as you can in preference to fruit. Eat lots of nuts, eat lots of fibre, drink lots of water. It's supposed to be a simple prescription, but it's not. It's actually very hard to implement, and we realise that, particularly when you've got all of these other stressors around cancer treatment involved. Alcohol. Look, honestly, I hate giving this message, but alcohol, the World Cancer Research Fund, which is my Bible in this field, actually says that alcohol, there is very convincing evidence that alcohol is a cause of breast cancer and a probable cause of bowel and prostate cancer. I wouldn't go that far. I think it's a risk factor. I don't think alcohol can actually cause the DNA damage, but it certainly isn't good for you. It's got to the stage where 5 years ago for me, the evidence got so overwhelming that I just don't drink anymore. I just don't. Because I just can't see the point in it. The problem with alcohol, particularly in women, apart from the fact that it contributes to round tummies, it actually interferes with estrogen metabolism in many, many ways that I won't go into here. But, you know, that disruption in estrogen metabolism is in fact one of the things that causes the DNA damage that causes breast cancer. So we have to think in those terms. So I'm really sorry to restrict your lifestyle in that way, but I've got to get this message out there. Movement is medicine. This is probably my favourite slide of all time. I just love these ladies. So I don't call it physical activity. I don't call it exercise. A lot of my studies actually just sort of are confined to exercise for very good methodological reasons. But what we try and help our women with is getting up, standing at the desk every day, moving as much as you possibly can, being vigorous to a mild sweat about 30 minutes a day. That's what it takes, because muscle is the organ, that beautiful big muscular organ that you've got throughout your body is what counteracts the harm that the round tummy does, essentially. It pumps out hormones and anti-inflammatory substances that actually counteract everything that the abdominal fat's doing. That's a very simplistic view, but that's the way we like to think about it. So the denser and your muscle is, and the more you've got a six-pack, if you can possibly achieve that, the healthier you'll be and the less your risk of cancer developing in the first place and any of these outcomes from cancer treatment developing. There's a whole new field called exercise oncology, and it's the most amazing field. I've heard a haematologist say to me, the only thing that will help after cancer treatment as the best medicine is exercise. And I'm more and more firmly coming to believe that. The way that it works is that the recommended diet, the recommended amount of movement, and increasingly we're thinking the recommended amount of sleep actually decreases harmful hormones, it reduces fat, it decreases things like insulin and glucose dysmetabolism, if you want to call it that way, and it helps control appetite. And overall, all of those things improve immune function and decrease the risk of cancer and adverse cancer treatment outcomes. So yeah, really simple. We know what we need to do, but how on earth do we do it? It's really, really hard. So what we've done, we've spent the last 15 years working, I've been working with a very multidisciplinary group. We're very top heavy with exercise scientists actually, on the Women's Wellness Research Program. And what we do is we don't believe that you can separate exercise from diet, from sleep, from stress management. You've got to bundle all of that into one package. You've got to address the lifestyle issues without privileging one, because they all support each other. And so we have developed over the years a series of interventions that look at all of those things, which is most important to women, and help them with it. And we've had some amazing outcomes in terms of quality of life, physical activity increases, excellent diets being adopted, and stress management just plummeting to the, or stress levels just plummeting to the floor. It's been really gratifying. I have to say though that our biggest failure is in alcohol. So at 12 weeks, when most of our interventions finish, we have all of these fabulous outcomes. And then when we remeasure things at week 24, 12 weeks later, those gains are either increased or maintained. Most of our women actually at week 24 are drinking far more than they ever did at baseline. And when I ask them why, it's like, because we feel so well now. Your intervention did. So we're working on that. I'm working with some alcohol specialists to actually address that problem. Wish me luck. And so currently we also have running out of MRI and UQ the Acumen trial. So we did find a few problems with exercise. We've never really worked with gynae cancer patients. So now we're working exclusively in Acumen trial with gynae cancer patients, giving them a 12-week, very supervised, very closely supervised exercise program. And that's going gangbusters. We've had a lot of support, particularly from Professor Lou Edwards at the Mater for that one, which is great. I'll let you. This is the Emerald trial. This is actually happening concurrently in Brisbane and in New Zealand. We're New Zealand wide with this one. Despite COVID, the New Zealand arm is finished, and despite COVID, this one's aimed at younger women, so women who are premenopausal at the time of breast cancer. Previously, we've just worked with women who were postmenopausal, so now we're targeting people younger and younger. And in New Zealand, when we ran this study, COVID hit the day that we were opening the trial in New Zealand, and we were delayed 9 months, but we still finished recruitment 12 months early because women so want these interventions. They just want them. I can remember with the original Women's Wellness Program, we did some ABC when we opened the trial, and after 900 women registered, the whole website crashed because we were just so overwhelmed with people wanting this stuff. So Emerald is a 12-week program for younger women with breast cancer, and that's just about to start in Brisbane. One I'm very excited about is the Balance study, which we got funding for this year. We are going to work with young people who've had a diagnosis of cancer between the ages of 15 and 24, and they're going to design their own intervention, lifestyle intervention. And it will probably include stuff like relationship support and, sexual well-being, management of education, as well as those things to do with movement and diet that are so important to our hearts, but probably aren't to theirs. So I'll keep you posted on that. It is a study that's we're very excited about. The very good thing about this is that we're working in partnership with Canteen, and Canteen will take complete ownership of the program once we finish the research. So we know that it will just translate instantly to practice. So in closing, I'd like to thank very much the Mater Foundation. It's been my very great pleasure to work at MRI with the support of the Mater Foundation for the last 2 years. It's a wonderful supportive environment, and I've really enjoyed my engagement with everybody from the foundation. Thank you very much.
So much, Sandie, for that wonderful presentation. And I'm sure you'll all agree and are going to take note of the key take-home messages. And I'm sure the Mater Research Executive is noting whether to serve alcohol at the Mater Christmas party. Anyways, our next speaker is Professor Geoff Faulkner. Geoff has a joint appointment at Mater Research and the Queensland Brain Institute, and is an adjunct professor at the School of Biomedical Sciences at UQ. Geoff leads the Genome Plasticity and Disease Research Group at Mater with a team of 13 researchers. He is a computational and molecular biologist with research interest in transposable elements, cancer genomics, and neuroscience. He has authored over 80 scientific publications, with these being cited nearly 18,000 times, and has secured continuous research funding from NHMRC since 2009, a great feat. He has received also funding from CSL, ARC, NIH, EU, and many other organizations as lead investigator. Today, Geoff will share and talk to us about the new technology to generate unprecedented maps of DNA mutations to better understand and treat cancer. He will also talk about his work on mutations that are found in the DNA of normal nerve cells, i.e. neurons, in the human brain, and discuss whether these mutations are related to healthy brain functions or neurodegeneration. Welcome, Geoff.
Thank you, Denisha, and good morning, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be able to give a brief snapshot of the work that my team is doing here at Mater and also at QBI. So I wanted to start off with a sweeping generalization, and that is that the majority of health conditions and health expenditure in Australia is due to two things, two simple contributing factors. One is that we live a long time, which is good. It's good that we live a long time. And secondly, that we have really big bodies compared to other animals. So this means that we need to grow immensely from the very start of our development. And then we need to maintain these big bodies. So on the left is a fertilized egg. In the middle is my youngest son, and on the right is my dad enjoying himself last Christmas. To go from the early stages of life from one cell to an adult, you have to go from one cell to tens of trillions of cells. And then once you're made up of tens of trillions of cells, you then need to maintain those. So you need to have constant cell division during the earlier stages of life. And then once you reach full size, you need to keep that body going. So we have cell division happening all the time during our life. And in order for a cell to divide and to pass on its genetic instructions to the next cells, it needs to replicate its DNA. And when cells replicate their DNA, even though in humans this is incredibly efficient and really, precise and works very well, there's always prospects for errors. And indeed, this is the main source of DNA damage that we accumulate during life. It's just mistakes made when cells are copying their DNA. Second to this is damage from our environment. So here we're talking about smoking, infection with various viruses, UV, drinking, all the things that public health is really working hard and things that public health can deal with in terms of reducing risk factors. But the main source of DNA damage to our bodies during life is replication and errors made during replication. And this is happening in all of us all the time. And we are currently doing nothing, and we have no way to prevent it. It's simply a part of growing older. Now, one of the downsides of this happening, and one of the consequences of this happening, is that every cell in the body is potentially unique in its DNA. So rather than looking at our bodies as this homogeneous genetic entity where all of our DNA is inherited and then stays invariant, we can consider it as being a mosaic. So this is actually referred to as somatic genome mosaicism, to be quite technical. And what this mosaicism is describing is the fact that every cell is acquiring DNA mutations during life, and they acquire different mutations, and therefore each cell in our body is potentially unique. And the mutations that the cells acquire in their DNA are then passed on to their offspring, and they build up as we get older. In my team, we're very interested in this particular phenomenon. We want to know where and when it's happening. We want to know why it's happening. Why are these errors occurring? What are the sources of these different types of errors? And most importantly, what does this mean for human biology? What does this mosaicism actually do to us? Is it contributing to human disease? It would appear that the vast majority of cancer, human cancer, is actually just due to this natural process of mutation, as opposed to environmental factors. And most importantly, we're interested in, can we use this information to intervene? Can we explain disease better and potentially come up with better treatments with this knowledge in mind? So talking about finding mosaicism, the frontiers of genomics have really advanced incredibly, much faster than science fiction or anything you see in a movie. It's been absolutely amazing what we can do now in terms of genetic engineering and in terms of sequencing DNA. This is a picture released by a company called Oxford Nanopore, and they are world leading in generating what's called long read DNA sequencing. And the reason it's called nanopore sequencing is that the native DNA molecules are fed through the nanopore. They displace a charge, and that charge can be read by a sequencing machine, and it tells us what the sequence is of that DNA. Now, this is absolutely incredible because the pieces of DNA that go through these pores are very long, millions of bases of DNA at a time, which are already assembled and ready to be analyzed. The other great thing about this tech is that there are chemical modifications on the outside of DNA, which are very important for us to understand exactly what the different parts of DNA are doing. And this technology from Oxford Nanopore gives us that information as well. So to break down what this actually means in terms of practice, up until recently, the vast majority of genomics and the analysis of DNA was done with short read DNA sequencing. It's just a few hundred bases of DNA at a time. And you're trying to assemble something as complex as the human genome. It's a lot like one of these Escher puzzles, which if you've ever tried to do, are extremely frustrating. And because of this, and because of the complexity and because of the small pieces that we have, most of the puzzle actually remains hidden to us. So when clinical diagnosis is being based on genomics, usually the vast majority of our genetic sequence is obscured. So clinical decisions are made based on key parts that we can sequence with these short read approaches, but it's not a holistic view of the genome. And what long read sequencing does is it gives us bigger pieces of DNA. It makes the puzzle simpler, much simpler. And so we can assemble the simplified picture of things much more easily. And on top of that, we get the epigenome. These are the chemical modifications I was mentioning before, which tell us what parts of the DNA are switched on and which are switched off, which is very important for figuring out what that bit of DNA is actually doing. So the long read sequencing is a really revolutionary approach, and it gives us a complete view of DNA, and we can apply this to human tissues to track mosaicism and to detect mosaicism. So here at MARTA, we are working with long read sequencing on a number of different cancers: lymphoma, ovarian cancer, liver cancer, and lung cancer. I'll talk a little bit about our lung cancer work here. Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death in Australia. For some types of lung cancer, like squamous cell carcinomas, the 5-year survival rate is absolutely abysmal. It's less than 20%. And this hasn't really changed over a long period of time. So we received pilot funding from Cancer Australia to apply our long read sequencing approach to clinical samples, which are obtained at MARTA by the David Cerisier Respiratory Biobank, which is organised by Lucy Burr. And this project is led by Seth Cheetham, who's a senior postdoc in my lab. So in this project, we're sequencing tumours with the long read sequencing approach. We're sequencing the adjacent non-tumour liver tissue as well, and we're sequencing blood from patients. We're also sequencing lung tissue from normal individuals, so people who don't have lung cancer. Because what we're interested in with this project is whether smoking, which is the main risk factor here, whether smoking is taking that natural landscape of mutations which are in your lung, is smoking pushing those mutations to give you cancer, or is smoking just giving you a new set of mutations, which then results in cancer down the track. The other thing that we're doing here is that we're attempting to come up with a way to detect cancer after surgery. So say, for example, in this case, for another lung cancers, we have surgical removal of the tumor and then there's follow-up treatment. When the down the track, when patient comes back in to see how they're going, we can take more blood. Then from that blood, we could sequence, and we can sequence samples taken from that blood and develop very sensitive assays to see, can we find the tumor cells circulating in the blood? And if we can do this, can we use it to inform treatment? And also give some prediction and some ability to do surveillance to see, is this cancer coming back soon and what should we do about it? The other arm of my lab, which is at QBI, works mainly on neurodegeneration. So I'm going to switch gears here. And here we're working mainly on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. I'll talk briefly about Parkinson's disease. Obviously, it's a progressive nervous system disorder that affects movement, with the hallmark tremor of the hands being the early stage of the disease. And surprisingly, in Australia, there are about 100,000 people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And one of the key things about this disease is that it has a very specific underlying cause, and that is the death of a particular type of nerve cell or a neuron in the brain called the dopaminergic neuron. And these are a type of neuron that's receptive to dopamine, which is a chemical transmitter in the brain, which is very important for nerve cells to talk to each other. And in this project, we're very interested in what's happening in terms of mosaicism, what's happening in terms of DNA damage in these dopaminergic neurons in patients. The issue is in Parkinson's disease, you never get these cells, because when someone is kind enough to donate their brains to medical research after they die with one of these conditions, those nerve cells are gone. That is why you get Parkinson's disease. So we have to study these things with animal models. So here at QBI, Gabriela Badea is a senior postdoc in my lab, and Eugenia Ferreira is a PhD student in the lab as well. And they're using an animal model of Parkinson's disease where the animals are injected into the brain with a toxin, which mimics Parkinson's disease. It gives a mouse the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And we're able to obtain those dopaminergic neurons from these animals and then conduct a number of analyses, which are showing at the moment that those nerve cells do acquire damage faster than other types of neurons. And we're looking into why this is. So we're applying long-read sequencing to this model system as well. So my lab has a major interest in genomic technologies. We're mainly applying this now to diseases which are related to aging. This is cancer and neurodegeneration. And this is a very fast-moving and I think very exciting space to be involved in. So I'll leave it there. These are the people from my team and others who have contributed to the work over the years. Of course, I should thank the Mater Foundation for supporting our work over the years. And also my contact details there at the bottom. So reach out and have a chat if you have any questions, or we can have a chat afterwards as well. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Geoff, for that fascinating presentation. So our last speaker in this session is Professor Vicki Flenady. Vicki leads the Stillbirth Research Group at Mater Research and is the lead investigator of the NHMRC Centre of Research Excellence in Stillbirth, which is actually a collaboration across 6 Australian universities with strong links to the perinatal clinical services and policies and wide community research. The Stillbirth CRE aims at reducing stillbirth rates and improving care for parents whose child was stillborn through undertaking high quality research that translates into improved clinical care, community awareness, and outcomes. Vicki has authored over 150 scientific publications, including several articles in 2 Lancet Stillbirth series and over 20 Cochrane systematic reviews. Today, Vicki will talk to us about the pivotal role of the Stillbirth CRE to reduce stillbirth rates and disparities between the advantaged and the disadvantaged communities, with the overarching goal to improve care for all families who experience the loss of a baby. Over to you, Vicki.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Maher and others in the executive, to speak today about a topic that I'm very passionate about. And there is some light at the end of the tunnel in addressing this neglected tragedy of stillbirth, and I will just touch on that. Early successes in my presentation today. But first of all, I thought I'd start with breaking down a couple of myths, giving some facts. The reason why stillbirth rates have been so slow to reduce over the last 3 decades, has been very little change in the stillbirth rates, is because it's surrounded by stigma, taboo, misunderstanding. It's not spoken about. If we can't talk about it, we can't fix it. So just a few facts about what stillbirth is for you today. Stillbirth is the loss of a baby during pregnancy or during the labour at 20 weeks gestation or more. WHO start at 22 weeks, but in Australia we start at 20 weeks gestation or more. Below 20 weeks, these losses are termed miscarriage, still a tragic loss for families, but our work focuses on babies who are born without signs of life at the halfway through their pregnancy, from halfway through the pregnancy. And as you imagine, the preparation and the excitement that families are experiencing up to that halfway point, and then to be struck down by the tragedy of stillbirth is a shocking experience. So stillbirth affects mothers, fathers, their families, health services, societies and governments. And this paper that we published in the Lancet Stillbirth series in 2016 really quantified that impact across society. Mothers and fathers experience acute distress, long-lasting grief. And that's not helped often by the fact that those around them are also suffering shock.
and don't provide these families with the support they need. As I said, stillbirth has been really hidden in the shadows and therefore not addressed until this Lancet Stillbirth series, first in 2011 and 2016, that really shone a light on this neglected tragedy where 3 million stillbirths occur every year around the globe. And this is only counting those late gestation stillbirths because globally the data is so poor, poorly collected on losses below that. So we can only look at third trimester when we're looking at stillbirth rates. It would be double that number using the definition that we use in Australia. And many of these can be prevented with the interventions that we know now. This Lancet series was really, it triggered a remarkable response, not from just academia, but organisations and around the world. And it really started the journey of bringing stillbirth out of the shadows and really to have an impact on stillbirth rates. I was very fortunate to work with the team across high-income countries to really synthesise the research across a number of countries to work out what can we do to address this problem. And we published it, these analyses in these 3 major papers. One of the key things we did was to look at how countries are faring. So we looked at a leagues table about stillbirth rate reduction and actual stillbirth rates. And at this time, the most recent data was 2016. This is a couple of years ago now. And particularly the group in Australia at Mater really wanted to know, what can we do in Australia? So we had a look at where we sat, and we sat 15th in this leagues table in terms of our stillbirth rate against these other high-income countries, and we thought that wasn't good enough. If we could reduce our stillbirth rates to that of the best performing countries with very low rates, then we estimated we would avoid at least 200 babies lost every year through stillbirth. So that's been our target. Thankfully, the National Health and Medical Research Council took notice of these data and funded us our first Stillbirth Centre for Research Excellence in 2016, which has just come to the end, and we're very, very excited to see that NHMRC still feel this is important and have continued our funding. We have 4 priority research areas. Data to drive change. So how can we actually use the data that we collect during our routine practice to really monitor what's happening quickly and being nimble to be able to change our practice and keep improving care. Priority area 2 is novel approaches to prevention. Professor Salesh Kumar is here, and I think Vicki Clifton, who lead this program, and I won't be referring to that any further today, but they're working on novel approaches to reduce these deaths. Priority area 3 is what I will be focusing on in my talk today. It's about implementing what we already know. We have synthesized about 2 decades worth of research in this space, and we are now rolling that out into everyday clinical practice across this country to make a difference. And I'll come back to that. Optimising bereavement care is a partnership with ISSR at UQ to really ensure that parents who suffer this tragedy get the best possible care and get on their road to recovery. Across this whole program is the cross-cutting theme of diversity and equity, co-design and capacity development. So we're working with Indigenous communities and with Kim Ray here at Mater for Queensland, across South Australia and Western Australia, and now just a project officer in Northern Territory to co-design stillbirth prevention and bereavement care strategies for these communities to meet the needs of these women and families who suffer almost double the rates of stillbirth as their counterparts. So this is a very quick snapshot of the research that's happened over the last 20 or 30 years in terms of what we already know and what we need to implement. and the current state of affairs. And we published that in Women and Birth just recently. But in Australia, over 2,000 babies every year die as a result of stillbirth, 6 every day. That graph shows the top line there that things haven't changed much. And we estimate that we can reduce stillbirths by a further 30% just implementing what we already know now. This has been fantastic. The National Action Plan, we worked hand in hand with government and parent-based advocacy organisations to lobby for change. We now have a national action plan that was endorsed by Minister Hunt last December, and it's being rolled out in various ways. And you can see the 5 priority areas listed there. And we are so pleased to see that prioritising stillbirth research has a Guernsey, and we now are working with parents, policymakers and researchers around the country to prioritise that research for the next 5 to 10 years, putting a dollar figure against those projects and hoping funds will flow to allow that to happen. This is a major project I wanted to focus on today, and it's about the Safer Baby Bundle. We have Christine Andrews in the audience here as a postdoc who's leading this work or driving the evaluation particularly, and it focuses on 5 elements of care: smoking cessation, detection of babies who aren't growing well, maternal concern of decreased fetal movements. It's an indicator of adverse pregnancy outcome, the importance of side sleeping for women to ensure a healthy baby, and getting the timing of birth right to ensure that we avoid stillbirth without increasing unnecessary intervention. Things that we have been doing but not doing well, and new research now has given us more guidance. And I'm pleased to announce that the first data coming out of Victoria has shown a 20% reduction in stillbirth rates and saving across these maternity services involved in that 20 stillbirths over that time. So 20 families already spared the tragedy. Very exciting work, and we're hoping that's going to be replicated across the country as we're having a national rollout now to all maternity services in the country through additional funds through MRFF and government funding. So I just wanted to reflect on the road to now, and just to say I started working in the Mater Perinatal Epidemiology Unit in 1995. I'm starting to look a bit old, I know. But anyway, it's been a fantastic journey. There's been some really key achievements along the way, supported by Mater, driven by Mater and the Mater Foundation. So huge thanks to all the support over many years, and it's culminated in us receiving another round of funding to continue this work. And over the next 5 years, we're really going to see a big difference in the landscape of stillbirth in this country. I just wanted to finish by acknowledging the parents and families. This is a parent's worst nightmare. Their baby dying, their child dying. And this is a photo of, it still gives me goosebumps, Heidi and Ned Muir's baby daughter, Sophie, who was stillborn at Mater in 2011. And Sophie and I, with the team at Mater, have been working really to drive change for such a long time. And I would just acknowledge everybody that's really working closely with us and the team here. We have a team now of 19 here at Mater, and many across the country and globally through the International Stillbirth Alliance. So thank you for your attention, and thanks again, Mater Foundation.
Thank you, Vicki, for that wonderful presentation. I'm sure you'll all agree that we have heard some of the fantastic research that's being done at Mater and learned about the outcomes that this research is having in the impact that it's having in our community. So again, once again, I would like to thank all the 4 speakers for their wonderful presentation today. Can I please now invite the 4 speakers, Paul, Sandie, Geoff, and Vicki at the front, along with Maher and Assistant Minister Julieanne Gilbert, for a photo opportunity. Thank you. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce the chair of the next session, Professor Sailesh Kumar. Professor Kumar is an accredited maternal and fetal medicine subspecialist both in the UK and in Australia, and joined the Mater Mothers Hospital and Mater Research in 2013 as a senior staff specialist and professor in obstetric and gynecology. Welcome, Sandie.
Thank you very much, Tanisha, and thank you very much to the Mater Executive for organizing this showcase session and for inviting me to chair this next session. It's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce Sister Sandra Lupi, who will kick off the next session, where we will acknowledge and honor 4 very deserving winners of the Sister of Mercy medals. Sister Sandra Lupi has very strong ties to the Mater. She is a member of the Brisbane Sisters of Mercy and was a member of the Mercy Partners Council from 2012 to 2017. In 2018, she was appointed to the Mater Board and is currently a member of the Clinical and Business Systems Committee. She has more than 15 years experience in leadership in the congregation and has held leadership and governance roles in the not-for-profit sector, where she has led significant changes leading to the establishment and formation of incorporated boards in health, education, and welfare. Sister Lupi, thank you.
Thank you. I hope I have my microphone on. Can you hear? Thank you for the invitation today to speak to you about the early days of research at Mater. We've heard wonderful stories this morning of research today. So I'm going to take you back. First of all, I'm going to take you back 65,000 years ago to the First Nation people who were the very first scientists. And they have passed on the lessons of land, sea, and sky to the future scientists of today. From astronomy to engineering, chemistry to forensic science, and bush medicine. There's a wonderful book, a children's book actually, but very fine book written by a First Nations man called Corey Tutt and illustrated by Black Douglas, called The First Scientists. It's a book well worth having a look at because the contents of the book refer to the first astronomers, the first engineers, the first chemists, and more. And so we begin by acknowledging our First Nation scientists. And now I would like to take you to the story of 4 Queensland-born women who were pioneers of research at Mater. I knew 3 of these women when they were in their 90s. But today, let's imagine them as young women, keen to experiment, to study, and to discover, as you people here today are. The first one, science was a consuming passion for Katie Frances England, who was born in Rockhampton in 1871. She was a versatile young woman who trained at the Brisbane General Hospital to be a nurse. In her lifetime, she was a nurse, a matron, a tutor sister, a laboratory technician, and a keen gardener. Kate became a Sister of Mercy in 1904. And in those days, young women received a religious name when they became sisters. That didn't change until about the mid-1970s, when many of us went back to our baptismal name. But you will still remember some sisters by their religious name. Kate was known as Sister Mary Chanel. And in 1919, in the midst of the Spanish flu pandemic, Queensland's first hospital laboratory was established at Mater by Dr. James V. Dewick and Sister Mary Chanel. Dr. Dewick had studied pathology at King's College Hospital in London, and he found a willing partner in Sister Mary Chanel. Histology was Chanel's major interest, but as biochemistry became more prominent in diagnosis, she reveled in the chemistry of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. During the 1920s, the laboratory was essential in aiding diagnosis of many conditions, and the Mater laboratory sent out ever-increasing numbers of test results for conditions such as goiter and kidney disease that were prevalent in Queensland at the time. Chanel was someone known to be never content with good enough, always wanting to improve techniques and methods. The story goes that she saved for her first microscope by doing laundry for the more affluent patients at the Mater Private Hospital. Her fascination with scientific developments in the areas of bacteriology, biochemistry, and microbiology was increased by a gift subscription to an American magazine called the Journal of Hospital Progress. Now, I know Maher is going to like this next bit. She is known to have said that scientific work is costly and shows no immediate cash return, but medical science is worthy of a generous endowment. The second person I would like to introduce you to was Sarah Mary Higgins, known as Sister Mercia Mary, and she was a trained pharmacist when she joined the laboratory staff in 1930. Sarah Higgins, or Sally, as she was called by her family, came from central Queensland. And at that time, Queensland law required pharmacies to be owned by pharmacists. So the Mater Pharmacy was registered in the name of Sarah Higgins. Mercia Mary was a woman of many parts, though she always said domestic arts were not her forte. She was an avid reader of mystery novels, as well as the latest scientific and medical journals. She was described as short of stature, with a full figure. I like that description, rather than saying overweight, with a full figure, a hearty laugh, and a fund of common sense. When Chanel died in 1947, Mercia took over running the laboratory, as well as being senior pharmacist. She remained the chief pharmacist at Mater Private until the end of 1965, 1930 to 1965, and was elevated to the status of Fellow of the Pharmaceutical Society of Queensland in 1980, and 10 years later recognised as Fellow of the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia, thus recognising her pioneering work in establishing the first pharmacy within a private hospital with many laboratory services. And like many a scientist, Mercia was an innovator. When blood was needed for patients, Mercia came to the rescue. She trained in venipuncture, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and then could always be called upon to take blood from a donor. A great story told is that by one of her early nursing associates, who recalls going with her one day to Bogger Road Jail with her trusty sterile flask, stirring rod, and other paraphernalia, relieving a jail warder of the required amount of blood and bringing it back for a Mater patient. The third person I will introduce you to is Margaret Elizabeth Monaghan, known as Sister Mary St. Rita. She was born in Claremont, 390 kilometres northwest of Rockhampton. She was born in 1906 and joined the Sisters of Mercy in 1926 and began nursing training in 1929. After a short period in nursing, she too was one of the pioneer sisters in pathology. She had a brilliant mind and developed expertise in hematology, microbiology, serology, and histology. In the 1960s, she established a cytology department to provide a pap smear service for the detection of cervical cancer. She gained a fellowship in the Australian Institute of Medical Laboratory Technology for her published thesis on the cytology of blood fluids. In 1975, Rita was awarded honorary certification by the Australian Cytology Society for her outstanding contribution to cytotechnology. The fourth pioneer sister I have chosen is Claire Clark, who joined the Sisters of Mercy in 1927 and was known as Sister Mary St. Roch. She too began her career as a nurse, and over 30 years, she relieved in all wards in the public hospital, worked in the eye department and in casualty, did night duty, supervised the purchase of stocks, and was a tutor sister. Multitasking was practiced at the Mater long before it became a word we use today. Sister St. Roch was a pioneer in medical photography and in technology in the neurosurgical field. When Dr. Tokley, who was the medical superintendent at Mater, established Mater's first neurosurgical unit, she volunteered to be the technician in the, now I've got to see if I can pronounce this, encephalography department. Have I got that right? Encephalon. Oh, forget it. You know what I mean. She studied and passed senior maths at age 65. She then went to Sydney to the Prince Henry Hospital to train, came first in the exams, and gained national and international acclaim for her scientific work. But she simply saw herself as living the Mater motto for God and humanity. She's recording brain impulses in that picture. Mercia's dream, when she was running the laboratory, was to develop pharmaceutical services and research at Mater by training others. And these photos show the early days in the lab. Probably a bit different to the labs you have today. But to give you some idea of the caliber of these women, I'll tell you one of their outside laboratory activities. Hansen's disease, or leprosy, patients with this disease had been treated at the Mater Hospital and their blood smears had been processed in the Mater's pathology lab. It was through these contacts that the link to the patients at Peel Island, which was a leprosarium, was established. But not being content to treat these people as mere numbers in a waiting room or initials on a list of blood samples, the sisters, led by Mercia Mary, made it their business to visit them on Peel Island. And this was a bold step given the public neurosis about leprosy. But it is said that their main fear in going to the island, bringing Christmas gifts, was not of contracting leprosy, but of getting their cloaks wet as they stepped off the boat. These pioneer women were all born in rural Queensland. They began their professional lives as nurses, or in Mercia's case, as a pharmacist. They became Sisters of Mercy and were dedicated to their profession as nurses and as scientists. As a sideline, they spent many hours fundraising for Mater before the days of the Mater Foundation, with fetes and bazaars, using their skills in sewing, crochet, cooking, and gardening. And as you have heard then, from its beginning, research was an essential element of the Mater vision and culture. The Mater Medical Research Institute has honoured the Sisters of Mercy by naming awards for research excellence after 4 of our sisters who have been pivotal in the development of Mater and research at Mater. And these outstanding women are Regis Dunn, Eileen Pollard, Madonna Josie, and Michaelina Hearn. Sister Regis Mary Dunn, I've shown you one of her earlier photos and then one of her more recent photos. Many of you would have known Sister Regis. She was well known for her work in the field of medical science and bioethics. After being appointed to the Mater Public Hospital Laboratory, Regis worked full-time as a trainee biochemist while studying at Queensland University of Technology to become a medical laboratory scientist. Among her many achievements, she was the first to introduce cytogenetics into a laboratory and led pioneering work in that field. She established the first genetic counselling clinic in 1961 to assist clinicians, patients, and families to deal with the complexities of genetic diagnosis. She sat on numerous state and local ethics committees and advisory boards. She was the recipient of a wide number of awards for her extensive knowledge and passion for the subject. In 2007, she received the Order of Australia for her service to medicine and the support of bioethics in medical research. She also received a posthumous award as a Queensland Great. She was a pioneer in the field of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Sister Eileen Pollard joined the Sisters of Mercy after training as a nurse in 1942. She spent more than 60 years living and working within the Mater community as a nurse, a radiographer, a nurse educator, coordinator of the first accreditation of Mater hospitals, and recipient of many awards, including the Order of Australia Medal in 2006. But in 1986, Eileen was diagnosed with breast cancer. Her personal experience led her to become acutely aware of the personal stories and experience of fellow sufferers and their families. With true compassion, she visited cancer patients in hospital and at home and worked tirelessly to raise funds for the Cancer Council, winning the Terry Fox Award for the highest individual fundraiser for cancer research. Madonna Josie, for 15 years, was the nursing superintendent at the Mater Adult Hospital and became a fellow in the Australian Royal College of Nursing. Sister Madonna also contributed to Mater governance, serving on the hospital's advisory board and the governing board. She has maintained a close connection with many Mater people as an active participant and supporter of Mater nursing alumni. And an interesting fact, when she was congregation leader of the Sisters of Mercy in Brisbane, she began the process for the establishment of the MMRI in the building that once held the Mater private hospital that we know as Albini Place. And the fourth one is Sister Michaelina Hearn. Again, someone many of you would know. She was known affectionately as Sister M. She was a familiar face at Mater for 60 years. 60 years. I wrote here 66 decades, 60 years. She was a surgical theatre nurse, the ED of the Mater Private, involved in the redevelopment of the Mater Children's Hospital and the building of the new Mater Mothers Hospital, hence her hard hat. An integral part of research is both sharing information and teaching, and Michaeline was known for her teaching and mentoring of Mater staff. Her many years at Mater gave her insights into the ever-changing scene of healthcare and scientific research. In 2004, Michaeline received the Order of Australia Medal in the General Division the service to the community through project planning, development and administration of Mater hospitals. And so you have heard this morning the story of 4 women who were pioneers and 4 valiant women of more recent times. And I thought that perhaps it was fitting to end this by looking at the words from the song, Standing on the Shoulders. We are standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before us. They are saints and they are humans. They are angels, they are friends. We can see beyond the struggles and the troubles and the challenge when we know that by our efforts, things will be better in the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Lupi, for that very gentle and reflective tour of some of the unique individuals that have brought us to where we are today. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I have the pleasure of introducing the 4 recipients of the various Sisters of Mercy medals that we've just been hearing about. These medals are awarded to outstanding individuals for contributions in various domains, ranging from research, operations, research translation, and support. The first medal is the Sister Madonna Josie Medal. It is awarded to an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to Mater research operations, including research support services, clinical services, and everyday operations. The winner is Amanda Sands. Amanda joined Mater Research in February 2015 as an administrative officer for research governance and is now a research governance officer within that team. Since her appointment, Amanda has successfully helped Mater and various clinicians undertake research at Mater by helping organize their research governance applications and helping them meet all the requirements of state health departments within a Catholic framework. Thank you, Amanda. Well done. The next medal is the Sister McLean Ahern Medal. It is awarded to a Mater research individual who has a track record of high quality performance relative to opportunity and has made an outstanding contribution to student supervision. The winner is Dr. Sandra Richardson. Sandra leads the developmental molecular genetics group within the Mother and Baby program here at Mater Research. She is an outstanding scientist and has received many awards. She's also been nominated by many individuals within her team for this award. Although each nomination for Sandie was unique, all provided a portrait of an outstanding mentor whose guidance and drive to achieve the highest standards for her students. Congratulations, Sandra. The next medal is the Sister Regis Mary Dunn Medal. The Sister Regis Mary Dunn Medal is awarded to a Mater research individual who has made an outstanding research contribution throughout the year. And this year's winner is Dr. Adam Ewing. Adam joined Mater Research in 2014 as a research fellow and was ordered an ARC DECRA fellowship in 2015. He was appointed as a career track fellow in 2016 and established the Translational Bioinformatics Group in 2017. As a bioinformatics specialist, Adam's research interests and outputs are impressive, with 41 publications, nearly 2,500 citations, and a publication record encompassing collaboration with numerous other organizations. Congratulations, Adam. And our final medal today is the Sister Eileen Pollard Medal. The Sister Eileen Pollard Medal is awarded to an individual who has been outstanding in translating research into the provision of clinical care. And this year's winner is Dr. Lucy Burr. Congratulations, Lucy. Lucy has worked at the Mater for more than 10 years, starting as a specialist trainee in respiratory medicine and very quickly completing her PhD with Mater Research. She is currently Director of Respiratory and Sleep Medicine at Mater Health and leads the Respiratory Clinical Trials Unit at Mater Research. In 2020, she was awarded an associate professorship by the UQ School of Medicine. Lucy is the custodian of the David Cerisier Respiratory Biobank and has actively contributed to Mater's COVID-19 response. Congratulations again, Lucy. I want to thank again all the winners of today's medals and congratulate them again for the outstanding achievement over the last 12 months. Thank you also to Sister Lupi for her lovely presentation and talk and for handing out the medals as well. And I'm now just going to hand over to Maher.
Okay, well, just check this out. All right, it just leaves me to conclude our proceedings. I just want to say thank you to all our speakers and just a few other concluding remarks. The first is that we will be announcing our Betty McGrath winners, and if I had kept the piece of paper that I had a few moments ago, I'd be able to read them out. So in the interest of time, and because they're not all here, I won't ask them to come down, but perhaps at the end, if we can give a round of applause. So this year we gave 7 Betty McGrath Awards. These are to promote research excellence, particularly amongst clinicians and educators on the Mater campus, with a focus on health service delivery and innovation. The first 2 awards are for education, Sharon Clipperton and Eric Schultz. And then we have 5 awards for healthcare delivery and innovation amongst the clinicians, and these are Grace Branjerd-Porn, Lisa Gillander, Kim Warhorst, Peter Collins, and Bronna McAlinden. If you join me in. Okay, before we adjourn to have some lunch, just to mention 2 things. Firstly, that can all the speakers and award winners please stay for some photographs at the very end. And finally, we have a special award that we want to give to someone who I think will be familiar to a great deal of you. And I think she's had quite a big involvement for many years. I'm trying to find out where she is. Okay, so this is an award for Marie Knight. So Marie joined us about 10 years ago, and she was really instrumental in the move from the slightly antiquated facilities that we had for our biomedical researchers at Albany Place to move to these state-of-the-art opportunities and facilities that we have in this building. And that was a major piece of work in itself. But not content with that, she carried on. In 2015, she became the Director of Operations at Mater Research, and she was really instrumental in a widespread reform of a great many of our procedures and operations. Importantly, she steadied the ship in 2018 when there was some leadership change, and in recognition of her great commitment to innovation, last year, she was seconded, and now she's been given the permanent role of Director of Innovation across Mater Queensland. I'd like to invite you, Marie, to come in.
We're not supposed to do that. I know. Thank you, everyone. I'm so pleased that I get to continue with the Mater, especially after listening to stories about amazing women like that and amazing people like that, and to be surrounded in a room of amazing people like that. So I look forward to my next adventure, but have thoroughly enjoyed being part of Mater Research and look forward to continuing those connections. So thank you.
With that, I'd like to invite you all to the foyer for some food. Thank you.